There's a ton of new Sony hardware coming and all of it looks awesome. We got our first look at a real PS5 Slim. There's some awesome Final Fantasy VII Remake news that came out last week. And is Sony becoming Nintendo and limiting PS5 sales? Let's find out in today's episode of PlayStation News. Guys, if you've never watched this show before, basically I pick out the 5 biggest news stories from the past week in the world of PlayStation and deliver them straight to you so you can sound smart when you're talking to your friends about the latest games. And before we jump into it, this video is sponsored by me. Down in the description, I have a ton of affiliate links for all of the devices I'm going to talk about in this video, plus a few more. So if you're looking for anything like a controller, a new monitor, some games, any new hardware devices for your PlayStation setup, head down to the description and use those links because I get a little bit of a kickback and that'll help me build some shelves back there to put some things on so it's not just a brick wall. Let's talk about PlayStation Plus Essential, Extra, and Premium because now the dust has settled. I think now that it's launched and we've seen that we're getting the 60 hertz emulated games, there's a ton of different games on the service that you can download and play. Overall, I think the reviews have skewed more positive than a lot of people, myself included, were expecting. I'm definitely not saying it's perfect because it could use a lot of work, but it's a lot better than we were expecting based on Sony's like scattershot announcement where they were like, yeah, we're completely rebuilding PS Plus from the ground up. You're gonna get a ton of new games now and be able to emulate games. We're not gonna tell you if ones you've already purchased will be available for download. We're also not gonna tell you what games are on the service. Just trust us, it's gonna go great. But for the most part, it's turned out pretty damn good. I've seen an article going around the internet though that it's actually a worse value than what we've gotten before if you had PS Now, and it's really taking some mental gymnastics to see it that way, but I will explain it for you. So the heart of this controversy comes from the fact that with PlayStation Now, if you subscribe to that before they took it away, you had the ability to stream more PlayStation 3 games than you do at this point in time. And to be fair, there are some notable titles missing that were available before this whole transition period. There's a bunch of JRPGs missing, but 2 notable exceptions are pretty much the entire Metal Gear Solid series and also a big chunk of the Killzone series were taken away. But honestly, I still don't really care. And I know I'm supposed to be like all up in arms, like Sony is removing value from their service by taking these games away. But at the end of the day, these games that are missing in the transition from PlayStation Now to PlayStation Plus were streamable games. So how many people were really sitting there like, man, I really so badly when this new PlayStation Plus comes out as someone who didn't subscribe to PlayStation Now want to stream Metal Gear Solid 2 Guns of the Patriots. Like there are so many different ways you can play that game at this point that aren't streaming the PS3 version over the cloud that I feel like that's possibly the worst option you could ever have. I mean, you can pop your Metal Gear Solid HD collection disc into your Xbox Series X, your Xbox One X, your Xbox One S. You have so many options there and it'll just work. You can also buy the collection for Vita. You can play Metal Gear Solid 3 on the 3DS in full 3D. And it's honestly one of the better versions of that game. And if all else fails, you can emulate it on like an Android phone and it runs really well. So yeah, removing that removes value. I see that standpoint. If you are that person, I think you're definitely an anomaly and you should look at the other games that are included with the service that are newer that you can actually download, like Ghost of Tsushima's Director's Cut, for example, or Returnal, or Demon Souls, or pretty much any of the other PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 games that are included with this service. Now, where I do see legitimate criticism is with these new versions of the Resident Evil remakes, Resident Evil 2, 3 remake, and 7. They all got upgrades that basically gave them ray tracing and high frame rate modes. Those are turning out to be kind of a mess, especially with Resident Evil 2 and 7. The games are crashing, reflections look weird, the ray tracing doesn't always work right, but it was a free upgrade, and for some reason, the people who download these games off of PlayStation Plus aren't able to take advantage of that free upgrade. This reminds me of last summer when people were really upset about the Ghost of Tsushima's Director's Cut when they included a bunch of PS5 patch type features behind a $30 paywall, and they were like, oh, well, you're also getting the expansion. And it's like, well, why don't you give me the patch for free and then charge me $10 for the expansion like you do with literally every other PlayStation game? So I can see it from that perspective because all of these features that were added into the native PlayStation 5 versions of these Resident Evil games were technically patch features. But yeah, looking at this removal of streamable games from PlayStation Now to PlayStation Plus, it honestly seems like they're cleaning things up so that they can get them ready for eventual PlayStation 3 emulation, which in my opinion is what everyone wants. That's what I want. I want to be able to play the Metal Gear Solid games natively competitively on my PlayStation 5. I think it's bull that you could play more Metal Gear games on the Xbox Series X than you can on the PlayStation 5. I feel like that's a fair statement to make. Let's talk about that PS5 Slim. We know it's coming, and last week here on the channel, I posted a video that you probably saw. My friend Treston made it for me, and we basically came up with a concept for a PlayStation 5 Slim together, and he brought it to life. And honestly, the most convincing fake trailer I've ever seen. Like, I watched it when it was in prototype form, and I was like, this looks real, we can ship it. And then he made it even better. So yeah, if you haven't seen that trailer, definitely go check it out. But the timing could not be better because DIY Perks, who you probably heard of last year when he made a gold PS5, is back, and now he's made the first official PS5 Slim. And this thing really takes the Slim name to a new level. So in the thumbnail, he's got it placed next to a standard PS5, and it looks like it's only about a couple inches tall. And he had to go through some real trickery to get this to happen. Basically what he did is he put all of the components he could in this small flat chassis, and then he removed the extensive cooling solution and replaced it with a water cooling brick that he's kind of hanging off the back of the table that he has the actual console resting on. Now that is not a criticism at all, because this guy literally took a PS5 and made it slim, and also did it in a cool way that leaves the console working and intact, which I think is really important here, because I could take my PS5 and I'm pretty sure I could make a PS5 Slim, but I'm also fairly positive that it would not work after the process. But the fact that he had to take out the cooling system and then replace it with a water cooling solution, that seems like a step farther than Sony's going to go with their eventual PS5 Slim, because water cooling, not only is it a little bit more expensive than what they have in the PS5 right now, it also introduces some issues like with durability. The whole thing with making a gaming console, especially a hardware revision like a Slim model, is to make it cheaper to produce and also sell, so you're not taking a huge loss on it. So including something like water cooling where there's actual liquid flowing through the inside of your console just seems like not only, again, a durability nightmare, but it also seems like counterintuitive from the sense that it would make the overall console more expensive. But those engineers over at Sony have been tinkering away on making the actual onboard cooling they already have a lot smaller. We saw a revision last summer where they made it like 12% smaller, and yes, it did make the console run a little bit hotter, but all the testing that was done on it by other YouTubers indicated that it was not degrading performance at all. And obviously we can't tell if that's shortening the lifespan of the PS5 because it hasn't even been out for 2 years at this point. But still, it was a very promising change that they made internally. And if someone hadn't taken the console apart, no one would have known the wiser, you know? Anyway, when you take the fact that Sony has been working on a way to shrink down the PS5 internally and then realize that, yeah, people can do this at home, I don't think a PS5 Slim is too far off on the horizon. I'm not gonna give my opinion on that. You've heard it a million times. I just think we should prepare to get one sooner than we probably wanted. Next up, we gotta talk about all this Final Fantasy VII news, and I honestly feel like I'm back in high school because there's so much Final Fantasy VII content. So first of all, Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade just came out on Steam. I've been playing it on my Steam Deck and it's absolutely incredible. I'm glad I waited. I tried it out on my PS5 and I was like, this is great. I would like to have it in a handheld form, because when I was a kid, I did not have the original Final Fantasy VII. All I had was the movie Advent Children, which I remember being pretty good, but I'm sure if I went back and watched it, I would be like, what the hell is even going on here? And then I also had the greatest of great PSP games, except for Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII featuring Zack. I love that game. I love the action focus of it. And now we are getting a full-on remaster of that game that looks incredible. If you compare it to the remake of Final Fantasy VII, it doesn't look as good, obviously, because it's a remastered PSP game. But if you compare it to the original PSP graphics, it is a massive upgrade. So that is coming this winter. That's coming to pretty much any console under the sun you can think of. I'm super excited for that. And also, the second part of the Final Fantasy VII remake, which is actually called Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, was announced, and it looks like the reason they're doing this Crisis Core remake is because Zack is going to be a much bigger character in this version of the middle portion of Final Fantasy VII than he was in the PS1 version. I don't know, haven't played too much of the PS1 version, but I do love Zack, and the trailer looked pretty grim, man. I know that they're changing things up and characters who died originally aren't dying. Spoiler alert, I guess, on that. And the story's kind of becoming its own thing, but they prove themselves with this remake. It is incredible. Just the combat, the graphics, the cutscenes, it feels like a premium AAA game. And after playing it now, I understand why Sony is dumping so much money into Square Enix's bank to make sure that this stays exclusive to PlayStation 5. Because yeah, it looks like the remake's second part, Rebirth, is going to stay exclusive as well. I can't believe I'm at the point in my life where I'm super excited for technically a JRPG, but this is like the most AAA of AAA remakes I've ever played, and it's awesome. Next, we got to talk about the downside to all these huge game announcements that are only going to be on PS5, and that's that a lot of people still can't get a PS5. We know that Sony is working on building factories. We know they say that they're trying to increase production, but we're really getting to the point now where I'm seeing articles where people are like, more people want PS5s than Sony is making. Why doesn't Sony make more PS5s? And this is about the first time in gaming history where I'm kind of on the side of these hate click articles, because really Sony knows the demand is there. They've sold 20 million PS5s and they've produced about 20 million PS5s. They are literally sitting there knowing that as many PS5s as they can produce will be sold, and they are doing stuff to increase production, but it's so far down the line that I honestly feel like they're increasing that production for the PS5 Slim and the PS5 Pro, and they're basically saying thanks for beta testing these new consoles to the people who bought that first 20 million batch of the PlayStation 5, because now we're gonna have a bunch more PlayStation Slims and Pros down the line that you can spend $500 or even $600 on. And that is the classic Sony that we know and love, and it honestly brings me back to when the Wii came out. That was like a total false scenario driven by Nintendo, where it was a popular console, like people were excited about it, but Nintendo made people even more excited for it by limiting the stock. So they would hold back more Wiis than they were actually letting out into the wild, so that by the time you eventually started to see them on store shelves, you would grab one just because you didn't know when you were going to see a Wii again. It was a really shrewd business move. I don't want to say smart, because now people know that they did it. And I think people look back unfavorably about Nintendo and their practices during that time period. And then they tried it with the Wii U, and no one wanted the Wii U. So it definitely bit them in the ass in at least one way. The problem is we just don't know, because Sony has this perpetual excuse that they can keep falling back on, that these things are hard to produce because there's part shortages. I mean, Xbox just announced that their shortages are extending into controllers, and if you see that happening, I kind of believe Sony to at least some extent that it's hard to make these things. But then again, people want the console, people will buy the console. Sony should be putting more money and more time into making sure these consoles can get made, instead of looking to the future and making a Slim and Pro model. Just my opinion. Just my opinion. So last week we talked about this Pro DualSense controller that's kind of like a competitor to the Xbox Elite controller that Microsoft obviously makes over there. The big point of contention in the comments that I noticed is that people were kind of going back and forth on if it would be a smart idea to lose the adaptive triggers. But then I was sitting there thinking, and the triggers that we have on the regular DualSense now already have like internal locks in them. Like they have locks that stop you from pulling the triggers all the way. So even if they do this Pro DualSense controller, they might just give you control over those internal locks instead of letting the game override it. So in that case, I feel like this controller will probably keep the adaptive triggers and all of the other features of the DualSense that we know and love, which is awesome. I'm super excited about that, but the hardware news did not stop there, because on top of that, we're getting 2 new monitors allegedly and 3 new headsets. So the headsets are using the InZone branding, and then there's the H3, H7, and H9. Weird naming structure, which basically lets you know that this is internal Sony, because they look like they're pulling a lot from the WH-1000 Mark IIIs, which I have a pair of those, and that's where I think the H9 is going to be the most competitive with that type of headphone, because using those on PC right now, they're great, the sound is incredible, but you basically need to have an external microphone plugged into your computer, because the microphone is just so goddamn awful on that headset. So let's start out with the InZone H3. This is going to be the cheapest model. It looks like it's going to be a competitor to Xbox's Xbox wired headset, because yes, this one is wired. It also has 3D spatial sound, and that's its 2 biggest features. It's wired and it has 3D spatial sound, and it's going to be cheapest. So that's cool. I would guess this one comes in at around 70 or 80 bucks, but if they're really going to push it, I would guess 100. good. The H7 seems to be the most similar to the Pulse Wireless 3D headset, but made more for PC gaming. This one's going to be wireless, which is an improvement. It's still going to keep the 360 spatial sound, which I think is pretty cool. And of the three headsets, it's going to have the best battery life. But the cool feature here that I think sets it apart from the Pulse Wireless 3D headset is it's going to have a microphone on the side of it that actually comes down over your mouth. I like the internal microphone on the Pulse Wireless headset from a comfortability standpoint because you can actually use those as just regular headphones, which is cool, but the microphone itself is pretty ass. So I'm glad that they're making a PC gaming headset that has a swing down microphone, and that actually differentiates it from the one they already make. And the cream of the crop, the top tier headset they're releasing is the Sony InZone H9. This one is retaining the 360-degree spatial sound. It also is wireless, which is great. It's gonna have a little bit worse battery life because it also includes active noise cancellation. Now there are pictures of all of these as you've been seeing, and this one looks like it has RGB as well, where the headband connects to the actual ear cups, which is kind of cool. I always kind of question why they include that on headphones though, because when you're wearing the headphones, you can't see the RGB, but if you have a cool headphone stand while you're charging it, that might be a cool indicator of what your battery life is at. It's a little bit of like style over substance, but you know, you got the most premium headset in the line. You got to differentiate it somehow. The only thing that's a little weird is it looks like the mic is not detachable. It's got the same like swing down mic that the H7 and I guess H3 have. If it's made to be competitive with the WH-1000 Mark Vs, I would want that microphone to be removable, because if it's including features like the same speaker drivers, the same noise cancellation, and it has that drop down microphone, that just kind of ruins it for me and makes me want to go with the regular version, the Mark Vs, more than the gamer version, because that doubles as headphones that you can wear on the street and connect to your phone and use as actual headphones, or like on a plane or something. Like, I'm not gonna put these H9s on my head on a plane and have the swing down microphone. They're gonna think I'm playing Counter-Strike on the plane or something, and no one wants that. Now, as for the monitors, there isn't a lot of info out there on those just yet. There's going to be two of them. They're going to include a video mode and a game mode from the leaked images, which is cool. They look like Sony TVs basically, but shrunk down to be PC monitor sized. And what I would also expect is Sony's True Color, or whatever the hell they call it, their competitor to Dolby Vision, where you have like HDR10, which does an across the board HDR calibration, and then you have Dolby Vision, which does it frame by frame. Xbox has Dolby Vision, and Sony was like, well, we make TVs, so we're gonna come up with the exact same thing and just call it something else. I would assume these monitors have that feature if I was just taking a guess, and that's gonna be cool because these monitors, while they don't have the PlayStation branding, they are apparently going to be marketed as perfect for PlayStation. And for me, someone who games mostly on PS5 and PC, that's a really good, easy sell for me. I need a new monitor. I've got a vertical line down my monitor that's annoying shit out of me, and it's been there for months, and I've just been waiting for a reason to drop hundreds of dollars on a new monitor. And as much as it kills me to say it, it looks like Sony's giving me that reason I've been waiting for.